After the success of Virgin Suicides, for a follow-up, Sofia Coppola drew inspiration from her father filming a real Suntory whiskey commercial with Akira Kurosawa in the 1970s. As here, she crafted a tale that not only was a love letter to Tokyo, but also one of two lost souls in a city where neither of them can speak the language, while at the same time generally confounded by the world around them, leaving them to dwell just on their personal issues. Certainly, it's hardly the sort of film that you would expect to turn into a huge hit for Coppola, not only with critics, but more surprisingly with the general movie-going audience, who for some reason really warmed to the film. I'm Elwood, and you're listening to Movies and Tea. Let's take it to the booth. Welcome once again. You're again listening to Season 3 of Movies and Tea, and tonight we're going to be talking about Lost in Translation from 2003, the second film from the season's featured director Sofia Coppola. And for myself, at least, this is certainly one of my favourite films, and certainly if you go into my letterbox and look in the top 4 slots, it's got pride of place in one of those slots there. It's up there with Destroy All Monsters and Ghost World and Freaks, and I said it's this film, and I think I'm right in saying for yourself, Kim, it's kind of like a polar reaction, and for yourself, this film sort of like more falls into that list of films that you describe what the cat's done on the carpet, like, wow, Pickles just left a giant Jupiter Rising on the carpet, and or I just stood in a pile of Skyfall. But what's your sort of general feelings on Lost in Translation? I mean, was this a film that you were sort of eager to sort of revisit, or was it one that you were sort of like, I kind of really don't want to be revisiting this at all?
I don't know. Me and Sofia Coppola have a weird relationship, I think. Because the first time, I think it's just the general idea is that her movies are really deep. And same for, Virgin Suicides. I talked about how, rewatching it kind of gave me a new appreciation for it. So I think Lost in Translation is kind of the same thing, where I think because I put a lot more focus on, the little details and the little things that, Coppola does with her films and whatnot, and, gave it a second chance, I guess. I definitely appreciated Lost in Translation a lot more the second time around. But I still feel like, Lost in Translation is like, I think the best way is like, it's like a chapter in someone's life where you meet someone memorable, but it's kind of like, there's that quote about how people, like, walk through your life, and some people only are in just, like, one part or something. I don't know the quote exactly, but, I feel like that's the thing, is that their friendship might not be long-lasting, but for that week or whatever in their life, it was, like, a memorable companion for both of them.
I definitely understand what you're saying. I mean, obviously, we've got two people here at very opposite ends of the spectrum to each other. You've got Bill Murray here, who's the aging actor Bob Harris, who's flying out to Tokyo. He's being paid $2 million to film this whiskey commercial, and he's very much at the stage where his stars kind of faded. He's no longer really making movies anymore, and his main sort of concerns are coming from his wife of how he wants his office decorated, and the fact he's missing his son's birthday to come out to Tokyo to film this commercial. The other side of things, you've always got Sofia Coppola's Charlotte, who's just recently graduated college, and she's in Tokyo with her husband John, who's played by Giovanni Ribisi, and he's a photographer who's on assignment, and he's so caught up in his work that he just really has no sort of time for her at all, and she's sort of left into the hotel room, and she's kind of bored and spends her days like looking out the window and decorating the hotel room with pretty pink flowers, and doing very sort of minor things like makeup and casual smoking. It's this very sort of mundane sort of life she's leading, and all her friends sort of seem to have things worked out. They're either having like kids, or they've got their sort of work life planned out, but she's sort of left education and now is at this sort of crossroads of like, well, what's next? I mean, I've got married and everything should be going forward, but I'm still sort of like stuck not knowing what to do. And it's, I'd say it's just through this chance meeting that they have that they sort of not only form this friendship, but also in many ways sort of able to sort of work through the problems together. It's like he's able to help solve her problems, and she's able to help solve his problems. It's a very sort of interesting and beautiful friendship they have.
Yeah. I think the charm of Lost in Translation is really in these two characters. Because if you think a little deeper about it, like, I was watching this, and I think at the end of it, what I felt like was that the opposites of them kind of grounded both of them. But at the same time, they were kind of like a comforting thought for each other that, or maybe not, I guess, because it was kind of like, they were a lot of times like a mirror of each other. Because while, Bob Harris has a lot of success and he's gone through life and he has this like long marriage and kids and all that stuff, his life is still, his life has really slowed down to, he's at the point where, what is next? Is it just this boredom that keeps continuing on where he has to do these absurd ads, which he doesn't even understand what they really want? And then he's getting paid a monumental amount of money, and he's away from his family, who also doesn't seem to care if he's there or not. Whereas, like, Charlotte has that same problem where she's out of school and she doesn't really know what she wants. She has kind of, I guess, a rather, she has kind of like those philosophy majors, which is really, you don't know what you do next. You either become a professor or you do something else, right? I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be like disrespectful to people with philosophy majors. I've never looked into the major myself, so I don't know what the next path is.
Feels like a very limited field. It's great when you're at university because you can impress people with your ever so deep thoughts. But when you get into the real world, it's not like we have a huge amount of call for philosophy majors in the real world. It's not something you can see yourself really sort of applying to anything.
Yeah, exactly. And she's at that point where, she feels very alone because she didn't, not only is, Bob Harris actually has some place in life where he is at, but Charlotte left New York to go to LA into a city, and I'm guessing a crowd that she doesn't quite enjoy because, as her husband, John says, she's really snotty about the whole thing. So she doesn't seem to appreciate and really enjoy the company that her husband has. But that's the circle that she's stuck in because of, the fact that she has nothing to do and she has to rely on her husband now. So, she's kind of at that crossroad where, where does she go from here? And, and I feel like a part of her kind of questions like where her marriage is as well, because, it's so young and it seems like she loves her husband, but there's something that's, not right.
Definitely so. And I mean, certainly this film is a very personal film to Coppola as a whole. I mean, not only does it have this little love letter to Tokyo where she obviously spent a lot of time and just really wanted to make a film in the city, but at the same time there's comparisons that can be drawn to her own life. The fact that this character John is seemingly based on her ex-husband Spike Jonze, who she married shortly after the release of Virgin Suicides. I mean, both of them had huge hits and were just sort of the defining figures of the American independent scene. Like, she obviously did Virgin Suicides, he did Being John Malkovich, and really at this sort of point he's gone on and he's like just this in-demand sort of like music video director, and he's like constantly away. And you get, as I said, this is apparently the feeling that we get, and there's so many elements of Spike Jonze that is shown through the character of Jones, in particular when he has the meeting with Kelly, here played by Anna Faris, who's apparently supposed to be a representation of Cameron Diaz, who, if we're led to believe the rumors, was quite cold to Coppola when they had a meeting after the release of Being John Malkovich. Mm-hmm. And so this was apparently a way of getting back to her by having this Diaz-style character who's just sort of like this airhead blonde who just has these really stupid press conferences and apparently can't sing well. So,
Anna Faris is, I don't know. I mean, I've seen a few of Anna Faris's role. I feel like she's one of those actresses which, she's more let me just say, I appreciate, I guess, her comedy every once in a while. In some cases, I think it was What's Your Number was my favorite movie of hers. And I don't think, and everything else feels a little kind of fallen into the thing. Like, her role feels kind of, I don't know what was the purpose of it. other than to prove that, you know, John hangs out with very stupid people. And it's to prove
definitely.
the point that, you know, maybe John doesn't see it, but, you know, Charlotte is right when, you know, she feels this way about the people in this circle. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Is it a commentary about the people in the movie world or the general? I don't know. I don't know what it's trying to do there. But yeah, no, I mean.
Oh, it definitely feels like, and it's certainly not going to be the first time that we'll see her make this comment on Hollywood, and certainly celebrity. But I just love it when she's giving the conference there, and she's basically describing the plot of The Matrix. It's sort of like, oh yeah, Keanu Reeves plays this Jesus-like figure who dies and then is resurrected. And it's like, you're just describing the plot of The Matrix. Yeah. But it's like these really banal details. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we got on so well. It's like we both have 2 dogs and we both like yoga, and it's like. And she plays it so perfectly, and this is what I love about Anna Faris. It's like, she's like supposed to be this dumb airhead character,
but that kind of is her bread and butter. It sounds really weird, but I think Anna Faris is, you know, she's not like that in real life. But
no,
because when you hear her like in interviews and stuff, she doesn't seem like she's that way. But like, you know, as a comedian, those are the roles she really falls into. She really embraces that, you know, dumb blonde thing, and she rides on that blonde thing that she has, and like she kind of mocks it herself, you know, and that's I feel like that's how she enjoys that sort of character.
Yeah, and certainly when you see how John interacts with her, and certainly the earlier conversation when he's talking about film with this band, and like the label want them to be like a more sort of like rock band with like the Levers and stuff, and he's like, no, they're just like these nerdy guys. It's like, why can't I just shoot people as they are? It would be so much better. And you get this feeling that he's more willing to sort of conform and you know, please people, where, you know, Charlotte, she's like, well, why do I have to sort of please people? Why can't people just accept me for me? If I want to make this sort of like joke and question who Kelly's using as her alias, because she uses apparently like a male name as an alias while she's hiding out in this hotel, and the fact Charlotte points out seemingly as a joke, but John's like, why do you have to be like so bitchy? It's like, not everyone can be, not everybody went to Yale, so so yeah, I certainly appreciate those sort of elements to her character. And as I said, when she meets like Bob, there's never this sort of like feeling of like, oh, you've got to change who you are to be friends with this person. You know, you can just be yourself. You can be,
because, you know, I feel like that's what their relationship, that, you know, their friendship is really good, because I can't really call it a relationship, but I think that's where their friendship is really good, is that Bob Harris, you know, going to Tokyo, the only people he knows going there is, you know, that warm welcome, all these foreign faces coming to him, and then trying to organize these things for him that he doesn't want, like, you know, some weird lady bombarding his room. And then, you know, you see this girl who, you know, like, he makes a good point, is that the first time he sees her is when, you know, through all these, you know, Japanese faces, there's one lady in the elevator that smiles at him randomly. And that, you know, really gives him that, you know, friendly feeling, where it's like, you know, it feels genuine, I guess, to him. And it feels more normal. It's like, he kind of can, you know, even when they're hanging out and she invites him to go out and with her friends and whatnot, it feels like, you know, he enjoys the fact that he's talking to a bunch of people who are normal, who really just are just everyday people doing everyday things. You know, they're, you know, they have all kinds of trades, from like surfers to, you know, and then they do like all kinds of, you know, like, they do like everything from bars to karaoke, and they just have a lot of fun. And it's like, you know, despite having that much time, they still, you know, find, you know, comfort in each other, obviously, when, you know, they take moments to sit outside in the quiet and whatnot.
Oh, definitely. So she provides a sort of entry point into this world, because obviously she has friends through John in this world, where people like Charlie Brown, who's actually Sofia Coppola's tour guide in real life, which I thought was really funny. It's he's played by Fumio Hiyashi, but he's apparently he's best friends with Sofia Coppola in real life, so that's another sort of real life things that she ties in here. But yeah, I love that, as I said, they just originally sort of like find this bond just through people wanting to be themselves. Like as you said, it's just like a chance meet in the elevator, and then again the meet in like the piano lounge, where he's kind of taking the piss out of the lounge singer by pretending he's like in a jazz bar. He's there like clicking fingers, and they're having this little joke across the room, which I think is just really cool. And it's from there that this friendship builds. He takes her out, she's takes him out in the town and introduces him to people, and it's through together that they then start to appreciate the world around them. Where before she's happy to go out into the world, but she feels nothing, because she feels this sort of like continual sense of loneliness. Like she goes to the shrine, and she's like going through Tokyo and like seeing all these really interesting sort of sights and it just nothing is resonating with her. She's just so caught up in her own loneliness and isolation that, as she said, she just feels like numb, and that she feels that she should be feeling something. And obviously when she meets Bob, she suddenly like starts like appreciating this world around, and it's like, so finally I have like this friend to just go on this jailbreak, as he puts it, with, so they just can go out and have fun in the city and go to karaoke bars and get chased by crazy BB gun welding bar owners.
That part was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was surprised me. Like the two scenes that people really, when people like talking, when this film came out, and people wanted to talk, people like talking about the film, there was like two scenes that they were talking about. The first was obviously Charlie Brown singing "God Save the Queen," and the other was the opening shot, which is inspired by the painting Jutta by John Cassary, whose work frequently depicted lingerie-clad women, and he painted like a very photorealistic style. And you can actually see the painting that the opening draws its inspiration from. It's in the hotel lobby as well. But yeah, that opening shot of Scarlett Johansson's backside, as we fade in the titles, it's an interesting opening. I don't know if you felt it was gratuitous at all, or
I don't have much, specific feelings about it, I guess.
It was also a shot that Sofia Coppola actually did the first take herself, wearing the same underwear, so good for her. But yeah, I think it was just more for Coppola's herself, really. I mean, she's obviously a fan of painting and art because it's what she studied before she went into photography and ultimately filmmaking. So I can understand her. You've got this attractive young Lauren Bacall type, and why not try and recreate this painting, even if the rest of the world thinks you're just putting something rather gratuitous in. So
yeah, just talking about the loneliness part of these two characters. What I really like about it is I think that in that week that they spend together, what happens between these two characters in the end, I think in that ending scene when we don't really see what they're talking to each other about, what Bob Harris whispers to Charlotte, I think in the end is just, I feel like because they went on this adventure together and they kind of like worked out some of their issues together, that I feel like both of them kind of embraced their loneliness a little bit more. I think to me it felt like it was a bit of a commentary a little on how people dwell on loneliness itself, because there's different types of relationships in life, and a lot of times, like, how I feel at least about relationships is that you need to be comfortable in your loneliness before you can be with someone. And it feels like Charlotte went into a relationship, like she got married and she hasn't embraced herself yet. She hasn't like sorted herself out yet. and now she's jumped into this. And I feel like, Bob Harris really, like, in that process of the week, really gave her that sort of, like, kind of, I guess, just settled her a little bit on, her thoughts and, not really knowing where to go and, that kind of idea.
Yeah, I hate it when people say that, I know a lot of people like to say that, oh, it's like a romantic film, but it's really not. It's just a film about friendship.
Yeah.
It's not a romantic connection that we see between Bob and Charlotte. I mean, they're just two people sort of hanging out, and the kiss that they show at the end, it never feels like it's got a sort of romantic connection. I mean, the whole end sequence was completely ad-libbed, and it drove people like absolutely nuts as they tried to figure out what was actually said at the end. And it's one of the few sort of mysteries that I've never really felt needed to be solved. I mean,
exactly.
Certainly when you start going through and you translate all the Japanese sequences, there's some really, really funny sequences in there, which are just sort of like funny again. It's like having these hidden little treasures to discover, like when he's filming the commercial at the start, and he's got the director who's speaking to him in Japanese, and his translators like relaying information back to him, and he's like, is that it? And you actually look up what he's actually saying. It's really quite funny because just to obviously break it down, we go up to the opening bit, and he's like, the translation is very important, okay? The translation, and the interpretators, yes, of course, I understand. And then the directors, as he's talking to Bob, he's like, Mr. Bob, you are sitting quietly in your study, and there's a bottle of Suntory whiskey on the table. You understand, right? With wholehearted feeling, slowly look at the camera, tenderly, as though you're meeting old friends. Say the words as though you're Bogey in Casablanca, saying, here's looking at you, kid. Suntory time. And of course, we never get that from the translation because she cuts it down into like, just like, look at camera and say line. And you wonder why this director's going like nuts. That he's like, wow, is he like just like this really fussy and overly particular director? But like, no, he's got his vision, but Bob's just not getting told what it is. The same as when we got the old guy in the hospital, and the old guy's actually asking Bob how long he's been in Japan, but Bob seemingly thinks that he's talking about the camera or the file system that's going around, and you can see in the background the two women who are just cracking up, which makes me think the whole scene was just another ad-lib scene, because it's so funny just like seeing these women cracking up because they clearly understand what this guy is saying, and Bob just has no idea whatsoever, but he's there trying to hold polite conversation.
Yeah. No, there's a lot. I think that, the joy in it is that, the movie is called Lost in Translation, right? So
yeah,
there's a deliberate, there's like, it's deliberate that these things aren't translated, and it's left to the translator and, for our interpretation. So it's, so when you look further into it, obviously, we know that the director's probably gone way deeper into, what he wants. But then, you have that sort of concept of, translators doing that. And I find that that happens a lot in real life, too, especially since I'm coming out of Fantasia right now.
Yeah.
And, I just came out of Fantasia, and there's a good bit of, foreign films. Obviously, I don't understand Korean, but when we were doing the Hong Kong film, there were things I found that when the translator was saying things, there were things I was like, I could do this so much better. And then I was like, I understand what he's saying, but then at the same time, I feel like the translation gets a bit, mixed up in it. Like, it's all the word choice, right? And like, and obviously in this case, for Lost in Translation, we know that it's like such a big difference, right? That it becomes such a funny scene because Bob Harris knows something's not right. And the woman just gives him like, super like bare bones of what needs to be done. So, it feels like, he's trying to be professional, but he can't.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know from my own sort of experience, like working in Japan and stuff, and you do get these bare sort of bones, and Japanese being one of those sort of languages where it's so sort of spaced out and stuff, you do wonder, it's like, oh, am I getting all the information here? And I mean, this even translates into like the Tokyos when we like look at some of the the titles here. I mean, like in the Spanish, it's Periodos en Tokyo, and in Chinese, I'm going to really butcher this, but I think it's Mission Dongjing, both which translates as Lost in Tokyo. Mm-hmm. So even the title gets lost in translation when it goes over to other countries, but I kind of appreciated that, and it's also a nice comparison you can see in later scenes, like when he's doing the photo sequence, how he sort of starts to relax and go into the world, and he starts, he connects with the general people. He's sort of like having the conversation with the photographer about how he wants him to pose, and he's like going through the Rat Pack, and he's being James Bond, and they have this conversation about Roger Moore and Sean Connery as who their Bond is. Even though the language is sort of very strained between them, you can see that Bob's like, he's starting to warm up to this situation that he's in. And the photography, the when he's having the photos taken, I just really like that scene where he's like trying to understand the instructions. It's sort of like hold glass to face. It's like I don't have it, I don't have the glass that close to my face, and usually, but or he's like when he's like doing Dino impressions or Frank Sinatra impressions. It's as I say, it's just Bill Murray just being given free rein to just like. He's been given bare bones instruction, and when you look at the script, there's a lot of scenes where it's all like very bare bones sort of set up, and they just give it to people, give it to them, and it's like, just do what you feel's right in this. And I think when you've got someone like Bill Murray who can ad-lib like that, and certainly in a comedic sense, it's just so perfect, and you can understand why Coppola was so determined to have Bill Murray for the role. I mean, she was ready to just walk away from the project if he hadn't signed on, and we're still in 99 he'd left his talent agency and he'd set up an automated voicemail. So the only way that you can hire him is by phoning this voicemail number, and she managed to get the number off Wes Anderson, who he frequently worked with, and she basically bombarded his voicemail with like over 200 messages trying to get a phone call meeting with him. And even then it was sort of like just a verbal agreement. There was no contract signed. So a week before film was due to start, she had no idea if he was going to turn up or not. And it was just basically reassurance to Wes Anderson that, Bill Murray's a man of his words and he will turn up. And when you look at the behind the scenes footage, he's like he's as I said, he's so chilled out and relaxed, and just really seems to relish working with Coppola. And I mean, even refers to him again in the bonus material as like being his director, and you can understand why this was like one of his favorite films of all time. Yes, it's a complete departure from what we've seen him before. I mean, it's only his second real sort of dramatic role, but it's kind of nice to see him do something more restrained, something more dramatic. And here, when he gets sort of free reign to do the comedy stuff, it's just really great. And just even when it's just conversation between himself and Charlotte about just minor things, such as like when they go to the restaurant where they're expected to cook their own food, or they're talking about shiatsu massage. It's just the flow of the conversation is so natural, and I think that's what really sort of appeals to it, and what certainly when you look at a lot of films which followed and tried to replicate it, certainly films like the Mumblecore style, where they tried to this natural conversation, it just never worked. It just sort of makes this film all the more special, really. Now, how the city shot, I mean, we obviously have to talk a bit about the cinematography here, because the cinematography is really stunning, and it's done by Lance Accord, who previously worked with Coppola on Virgin Suicides, and he would go into do Marie Antoinette as well. And I mean, he's really a key cinematographer for a lot of the guys and girls coming up in the sort of indie scene at the time. I mean, he worked with Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris on their music videos. I mean, they would obviously go on to do Little Miss Sunshine. He worked with Mark Romanek for 1 Hour Photo, and I mean, he worked with Spike Jonze as well, and Michel Gondry. So here's a guy who's like basically, I say, responsible for a lot of the visual style of the American independent scene of the early 2000s, all those sort of like great movies when we talk about how stunning they look. And here there's so many sequences, like if we're going for the city, or like when we got the nightclub scene where they where they're projecting imagery onto these giant weather balloons in the club. Everything just looks so cool. Even though Tokyo is like this magical place already, he just seemingly manages to make it look even more cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really like, how the scenes of Japan and like of Tokyo were shot in between, I guess, in between each of the pieces that, you know, how it transitions from one place to the next and whatnot. I mean, you have it from, you know, obviously from like the skyline, and we have a lot of like above shots of you know, just Tokyo in the day and Tokyo at night and all the lights that are going. And then at the same time, you also have, you know, scenes of, you know, Charlotte by the big window all the time she's sitting, and you can see like the view that she gets from there as well, because, you know, Tokyo is a really beautiful city, I would say, and there's, you know, a lot of lights. It's very similar to New York, of, you know, in some shots of different movies. Tokyo is kind of reminiscent of like Times Square in New York, and I feel that in some ways, if you think about the link between it, like, would Charlotte feel, you know, the same way if she saw the city that way, where this is kind of like, you know, yeah, she's in a foreign place, but you also have that, you know, concept of all these lights and all this bustling people in the middle of the night. Yeah. It's still very much, you know, the city that she grew up in, just in a different country.
Definitely so. I think it's as I said, I think the fact that she's in a foreign land, I mean, she doesn't speak Japanese. Mm-hmm. So I think that sort of adds to the isolation, whereas obviously if she was back in New York, I mean, there's people she can go and see because people aren't particularly hundreds and hundreds of miles away from her. Yeah. There's people she can obviously go and see and connect, and there's places that she can like get that familiarity with, whereas here in Tokyo, everything's sort of like new and sort of unique, really. Yeah. And I mean, as I said, I love it when she goes exploring out in the sea. I mean, there's lots of like nerdy little things I really like when she goes to the arcade and you see all like the games and stuff, and it's like, oh wow, Tako no Tachin, which is like the big drum game. And she's like playing Guitar Freaks by Konori, and you've got like the cool little punk guy there.
That was a really random scene, to be honest, but it somehow it fitted really well because she went in there and it felt like there was this like colorful world outside of her hotel when she goes to see, right? And you know, she seems to be enjoying more of the wonder around her as the movie goes along. Definitely so,
and there's so many slight shots in that, and it's like Coppola's like doing a photo shoot for something like ID or, you know, like one of those sort of fashion sort of magazines, and she, instead of like using a camera, she's using film to do it. And so you have these like shots of like the guy playing on the video game and like of his girlfriend, and just like as we're going through like the city. And I was so great the fact that they went to an arcade other than just like a pachinko sort of house, which is obviously featured because we see it when they're running away from the bar. They run through there, and normally when we see sort of Japan, it's always pachinko because obviously it's a huge game over there. I still don't understand how to play it, but as I said, the fact they went to an old school arcade is just like, it fills us with that warm glow. And it may just be the fact we're just video game freaks, and you know, any time they have like something video game related in a movie, it's always exciting to us. But yeah, I love it. As I said, I love all the little bits of culture that we see, whether we're going to shrines or we're going through like crosswalks, or even just like when you've got like the political campaign as they're going past in like the minibus. Just these little slices of life is just as important as the conversations that Charlotte and Bob are having, and the fact that they only really have sort of like one falling out, and that's when he accidentally sleeps with the lounge singer. And I don't know really, how did you sort of feel about that sort of scene? I mean, did you think that she was being too sort of possessive of a friend and sort of like, oh, this person's intruding on this thing we had. This is going against the deal we had. You going off and having this one night stand with the woman who sings in the bar.
I don't know if it's being possessive or the fact that I guess that she judges him a little, because I think she finds kind of an anchor in him. Like he kind of is, you know, like, yeah, doesn't have a great marriage, but he's still very loyal to his wife. You know, despite the distance and all that. And I think in that way she respects him because of, you know, the fact that, they share a very similar, they share a very similar kind of, I guess, marriage in that sense. And they share a very similar personality and likes and dislikes. And to her, I guess it feels, she feels a bit betrayed, maybe.
Yeah.
That, she was kind of relying on him. And I think it's a mesh of both of those things. That maybe it's like she's enjoying the attention of, having someone with her. And now she feels like this companionship is breaking apart.
Because, I mean, the next scene we have is obviously them at that restaurant. And the fact that they had this really awkward lunch, and it's really thanks to sort of like a fire drill. And you kind of wonder if she pulled the alarm just so that she would have a chance to have this to reconnect. And when they reconnect, it's no like big apology. It's just sort of like the only thing they apologize for is just the lunch. And Bob's like, I can't believe that place made us cook our own lunch. And I thought that was really nice. It's like no one wants to like has to take fault. It's sort of like, this is a situation that happened and we're moving on from it, and we'll use this awful lunch as our connecting point. And I thought that was kind of sweet, because I mean, you do have friends like that where you fall out for whatever reason, and when you meet up again, you just move on. You don't have to have this big, oh, I was wrong, or you were wrong, or you just get on with it.
I think that, sometimes the best friendships are like that, is that you don't feel comfortable with each other and you kind of walk away and then you come back, and it's not a fault of anybody. You just look past it and you keep going on and being friends. And that, I think that really shows the I guess the solidity of their friendship. And I think that that's really nice, because, this happens, more near the end of the week that they're together. And it's interesting to see that. I think that, sometimes when movies show these kind of friendships that build in movies on short spans of time together, it is true in slices of life where these things happen. And it feels very genuine, because it's like, they become really good friends. And you can really see that because they found, a way to look past all these things as well.
I love as well just how the film's sort of shot. There's no real big moments, no big dramatic moments in this. There's no huge sort of like plot points. And it made it a real interesting film when you try and describe it or sell it to someone. Especially I took my friend to go and Helen to go and see it, and it's sort of like you're trying to describe this film that you're going to go and see, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be the most interesting film at all. It sounds like, it's just some standard sort of drama fare at best, which made it all the more surprising. It just went on to become this huge sort of like hit, both culturally and with sort of like moviegoers. And as you said, when you watch it, it's not really a film that anything really happens. It's just two people having conversations and going to interesting places, and that's it. There's no big dramatic moments or anything like that at all. And as I said, it just feels like a very satisfying film experience. And I was worried, like, coming back to it, because it's been a while since I've seen it, that something might have changed, that my movie taste may have like differed now, so I come back to it and it wouldn't be the movie that I remember it as being. That was always the big concern, so I was kind of glad that it was. So
no, Lost in Translation definitely holds up. Granted, I didn't see it too long ago from now, maybe like 3-4 years ago I saw it, for the first time. So I mean, for me, going back to it, it was it's nice because this is a 2003 film, and we're talking about, now we're like 16 years down the road, and it still translates well. And I think that it really works, because I think it really shows something, like, because it's about two people, it's about a friendship, and it's about these things where it doesn't change over time. Like, over time, friendships are friendships. They don't really change too much. Trips are trips, and Tokyo is Tokyo. Yes, technology changes and all that stuff. But I think when you drop it down to a level like, just looking at human to human interaction, the longevity and rewatchability of a film is so much more than something that's, you know, fancy and flashy and full of, you know, CGI and full of effects and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, that's the charm of, you know, to me, that's the charm of Coppola films, at least, you know, from the two that we've seen.
Yeah.
Is, yes, there's, you know, a depth to it. And it sometimes feels like, I think both with Virgin Suicides and this one, there's kind of like that really like, you know, just a slot in your life, something happens, and then it becomes a memorable moment or a memorable time. Yeah. So it's nice to see film still being on that kind of like lower scale. And I think that, you know, because of that, you know, Coppola really embraces that, you know, that kind of more indie side of doing films. You know, smaller scales and that sort of stuff where, you know, you don't have to, you know, you can appreciate her for doing that.
Definitely so. And I have to also appreciate the fact she shot it on film rather than digital, because her father was like, you know, digital's the future, and she was like, no, I'm gonna shoot this on film, and I think it definitely pays off. If this was on digital, it would not look as pretty as it looks now, and especially when you're doing her sort of trademarks, which I said is we've said before, it's like natural lighting, and you have shots of light through trees, and just like moments when you're like looking out of the window, she's just looking over the city in the daytime and stuff. If that was in digital, it would look so horrible. Whereas film has this warmth, and as I said, when we're out in the city, I mean, everything has this sort of like warmth to it, and it doesn't have this unreal quality to it, because Tokyo as a city feels unreal enough as it is, because, you know, it's all this bright lights and this future sort of tech meeting with traditional custom. It's just this weird blending plot, and to shoot it on with anything that's going to take you out of that, it's just really not going to work. So the fact you shoot it on film, and it just even now it still looks lovely. I love things shot on film anyway, rather than digital. And I understand obviously with digital you have more flexibility, but I think here the extra effort to shoot it on film just really sort of pays off, and I think that's why we're still obviously talking about the film now, just on a visual sort of stance. It's just still looks as nice as it does now. So on to further viewing. I mean, obviously this is a unique film, like all Coppola movies, so not the easiest film to sort of pair with. But I mean, do you think of anything that you would want to pair it with Tolkien, or?
I originally, you know, for me, I think, you know, we talked about this off air, and I was talking about how that was the hardest part of this film for me. So my first thought when I first thought about it was American Beauty, but then I didn't feel too comfortable about it, so I moved on. And then I thought about a little film that I saw last year, which I doubt got a wide release anyways, because it's a foreign film, and I saw it at the Festival of New Cinema in Montreal, called Tourism. And I remembered when I told you about Tourism, you brought up Lost in Translation right away, because it was those films where you tell people and then they're kind of like, huh? How is that interesting, you know?
Yeah.
So what Tourism is Tourism is a film about two girls who win free plane tickets to go anywhere in the world. And she, you know, these two girls, they decide on, you know, randomly choosing a place on the map, and then they kind of like shoot darts or something, and then they go on these three things, and you see the whole process of them choosing, and they ended up going to Singapore. Both of them don't have good language skills. They don't know English. They don't speak. Singapore also speaks Chinese. They don't speak Chinese. So they're two Japanese girls going to this foreign city with their phones. And pretty much you watch their adventure as, you know, a spontaneous two people. And then they end up splitting because someone goes back to look for something, and then they split up, and then they can't find each other. And then one of them loses their phone. So you see them meet different people in that process. You know, you follow one of them as she goes and she finds all these people, and she follows them around, and she starts seeing all this culture from, I think, just, you know, meeting everyday people who take them around, you know, to different places. And on one hand, it feels very scary because you're kind of thinking about, that worry that these people are going to meet, the wrong people. But at the same time, it's kind of like that moment of traveling when you get to, when you just get to, I think it's like a story very relatable to Lost in Translation, where it's just seeing the culture from the eyes of a foreigner.
It definitely ties into many of the things that we see here. Definitely the idea of travel and new cultures that are obviously so radically different to our own. So, and more so if you don't speak the language, because I think that's always an easy way out. If you speak the language, you've got that sort of connection point already. It's like when you go to places in Europe, and a lot of places in Europe they speak English already, so you just go and speak in English, and you kind of don't get the full experience if you go out there and you try to muddle your way through the language and stuff. So. The first one would be the film that many people see as the sort of companion piece to this film, and that's Spike Jonze's Hair. This is basically can be described as Siri, the movie, where we've got this guy played by Joaquin Phoenix, who is trying to go for a breakup, and he kind of falls in love with his phone, in particular the Siri device, and he forms this very unique relationship with the AI device, and it's a really interesting sort of commentary on how we have this relationship with our technology, the fact that we form this sort of relationship with it, and this is sort of taking it to that extreme where you form a more emotional sort of connection with your phone or whatever. And a lot of people see it sort of see it as an interesting companion piece to Lost in Translation. Lost in Translation being the breakdown of a relationship, and obviously with Hair we've got the dealing with the aftermath, so the break up. And I think it's a film that I think we're going to discuss it at some point in the show, because I think it definitely deserves to be looked at a bit deeper. Both films won Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars, so they have that connection, as well as Scarlett Johansson appearing in both. She obviously provides the voice of this AI, and obviously she plays Charlotte in Lost in Translation. So it's kind of interesting the fact that we got these two directors who essentially making films to deal with a situation, and they both managed to win the same award, and they both have the same actress in both. So it's an interesting connection between the two, even if it's hard to say how intentional any of it was, but certainly the two make an interesting, I don't know, I dare say a double feature, but certainly there feels like there's a link between the two. If you want to see more of Bill Murray in doing sort of a similar sort of dramatic role, I would recommend checking out Jim Jarmusch's 2005's Broken Fleece. Plays this guy who receives a letter from an ex-girlfriend saying that he has a son, and he sets off on this cross-country search to find this son. He revisits all his ex-girlfriends, and along the way has these sort of interesting sort of encounters. It's not as good as Lost in Translation, certainly in that terms of that free form sort of dialogue, but it has some certainly interesting moments, and some great supporting cast, including Sharon Stone and her very appropriately named daughter Lolita. The last one I would recommend would be In the Mood for Love from 2000. This is a film that we actually rated our second best film of all time over in the Asian Cinema Film Club, falling just behind Battle Royale for that number one spot. But it's directed by Wong Kar-wai, who, if you're not familiar with, he's kind of like an art house director, and could be very much put in the same sort of category as the likes of Coppola, and just for his sort of world view. And he's, again, I don't know if you've got a lot of experience with his films, Kim, or he's somebody you sort of dipping out.
I have a very I would say that I would agree with you that he's in the same camp as Coppola, because I feel the same way about his films as I feel about Coppola so far. So, I mean, I'm not, he's okay, he makes very artsy films, and sometimes they're a bit too much for me. So I have a very, I saw, I think 2046 is by him, and I have a very sour taste from that movie right now. So, and it's been many years, so I haven't really gone back to
Yeah, I mean, 24/6 is the follow-up to this film, and in many ways I like to call this film his sci-fi movie, because it stars Maggie Cheung and Tony Leung as these two people who are sort of thrown together because their spouses are having an affair with each other, so they're sort of like drawn together, and they form this unique friendship. And as I said, I call it the sci-fi movie because nobody's going to cheat on Maggie Cheung. This woman, she falls into that goddess sort of camp of Asian actresses who get white boys flustered. But Maggie Cheung looks absolutely stunning, and the whole film itself is just stunning from start to finish. Again, it's a film that's really hard to sort of recommend because it doesn't sound that interesting, and certainly the title itself gives this sort of like misleading impression that it's going to be like, oh, it's this sweeping romance, because it's really not. It's just, these two people thrown together through a very unique circumstance and finding this friendship, and it's just a sumptuously shot movie, and just absolutely perfect, and one that I'd highly recommend checking out. But yeah, he's Wong Kar-wai is a director I sort of dip in and out of, rather than say, oh, I've got to watch everything he's made, because
So that might take a while.
He makes films I really like, and other films that I sort of have to take a couple of cracks at, like Chungking Express. I think it took me 2 attempts to get that movie. That was in my cinema shame pile for so long, and then I watched it again recently for Asian Cinema Film Club, and now just now I finally get this movie. But yeah, those are my recommendations for you to go and check out there. Now, before we go, we have got a little bit of mailbag to go through. First off, we're going to give a shout out to the Vern over at Cinema Recall, who has said it's just been really positive about this season. He's been very excited at the fact we're talking about Sofia Coppola, who he's said is like one of his favorite directors, even more than her father. So thank you, Vern. We're glad you appreciate our pick for the season, and also thank you for sharing your top picks for your favorite Sofia Coppola movies. Very surprisingly, having Marie Antoinette as number 1, which I would have thought would have been way down at the bottom, but apparently, like Jackie Brown and Halloween 3, it's had this reevaluation now where people are sort of like really sort of liking that movie for whatever reason. So it's going to time very nicely to next week, when that's obviously the film we're going to be looking at. I also have to say congratulations to Kim, who made a Lambcast debut this week. So you were talking about Hobbs and Shaw, so really comparable to this film.
That was a real break from everything. Yeah. No, I mean, the only connection I have with the Lamb is, from, this podcast, It's kind of a shameful thing, because I've never even, I've been too lazy to sign up for my own blog, which I've been doing for so many years, and yet, you being the responsible person between the two of us in this podcast, you want to sign us up. Yeah, so, no, it was a lot of fun. Hobbs and Shaw has about, so much that you can talk about, and it was a very tangent-filled podcast, but that also made it really fun, because everybody felt like they wanted to talk about that more than Hobbs and Shaw. I'm gonna have my thoughts on it that go up on Tranquil Dreams later on, but no, it was a lot of fun. I think we all in general felt the same way about it, although you might not feel that way if you looked at the rankings that we gave at the end, I guess. I guess it were just some of us are more forgiving than others. I really enjoyed the episode, so well done, Kim. It's welcome to the Lamb family. I mean, obviously been part of the Large Ass Movie Blogs for a while, and now bringing Movies and Tea over, so it's great that you obviously get to hang out with Jay and those guys, because I mean the Lambcast itself I think has launched more shows than Helen and Troy launched ships, so it's for many people it proved this sort of starting point. You go on the Lamb and then you sort of get the itch. You're sort of like, oh, I could make my own show, and then you go off and you make your own podcast. Jade's like provides this sort of like
this launch pad for so many people. They go on, they do a couple of episodes of the Landcast, and they get the itch to go and start their own projects. So I think he's responsible for a lot of what's out there in the podcast sphere. So. But yeah, if you've not checked out, definitely go and check out the Lambcast. They have a new show every week, and obviously the new episode that's out on Hobbs and Shaw, you get to hear my co-host Kim talk about Hobbs and Shaw and some other exciting things as well, because it's a real packed show.
And fail miserably on trivia. Yes.
And you get to hear Jay also question that Jaws 2 isn't as good as Deep Blue Sea. Really?
He has to, if he actually does that show,
we'll get him on here when we do Jaws 2. I'll turn him round. We'll have words for myself and Mr. Cluett, that's for sure. But next episode, Kim, do you want to introduce where we're going next?
Yeah, next episode we're doing Vern's favorite Coppola film, Marie Antoinette, from 2006. A bit of a biography, historical story, set in France, obviously. So it'll be nice, starring the, going back to Kirsten Dunst that kicked off Coppola's feature film in Virgin Suicide. So it'll be nice to see how this one goes. I've never seen it, so. I guess here's a good point to go that and, keep in mind is that from this point on, I haven't seen any other Coppola films. So everything from this point on is new.
Yeah, it's one I'm certainly looking forward to revisit. It's a very sumptuous short film. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of both cinematography and general food porn for this one. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion indeed. But thank you as always for listening. And thank you to my host, Kim. And if you haven't done already, please do hit us up on social media, if it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We appreciate all your support there. And you can also see interesting bits and pieces that we post up as well. You can also check out our blog, which is moviesandtea.wordpress.com, where we have our complete archive. You can check out our previous 2 seasons on Paul W.S. Anderson and Guillermo del Toro. We also post reviews, and we've got the film school up on there, where we talk about the themes and ideas that our directors that have been featured like to explore. So lots of great stuff on there, and you can also get in touch with us on any of those platforms and let us know your favorite Coppola movies or anything that you would like to see discussed on the show. We'd love to hear from you as always. But until next time, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time talking about Marie Antoinette. Good night.